Hey guys, welcome back. Go ahead and get comfortable. Dim the lights. Maybe grab that blanket that's somehow always colder on one side. Tonight, we're floating back to ancient Rome, land of marble, sandals, and emperors with more statues than emotional stability. And our focus tonight is Marcus Ulpius Traianus. Or, as the world eventually called him, Trajan. Rome's golden boy. The emperor every other emperor wanted to be, or at least wanted people to think they were. He was, officially, the second of Rome's of 5 good emperors. Which sounds impressive until you realize the bar was set extremely low. After the likes of Caligula, Nero, and Domitian, anyone who didn't burn down the city or name a horse as consul was basically saint material. But Trajan? He wasn't just competent. He was annoyingly good at everything, building things, conquering things, pretending to be humble while doing both. The kind of emperor who made the Senate write thank you letters instead of assassination plots. Born in 53 AD in a Roman colony in Spain, Trajan wasn't even Italian. Which, at the time, was sort of like being a French president from Belgium. His family had money, rank, and that crucial Roman quality, ambition so strong it could crush granite. His father, also named Marcus Ulpius Traianus, because Romans had no imagination when naming their children, was a successful general. He made sure little Trajan grew up surrounded by the comforting smell of leather armor, wet scrolls, and political sycophancy. Young Trajan joined the army early, because of course he did. He was tall, handsome, and disciplined. The kind of man who probably kept his sandals perfectly symmetrical at all times. His soldiers adored him, not an easy feat in the Roman military, where the average soldier's default emotion was mild hatred for everything. Trajan moved up through the ranks fast. Not only was he capable, but he also had that rare Roman leadership. Style, less screaming, more let's all suffer together. He didn't just issue orders from a tent, he waded into the mud, too. A very effective way to make people follow you, and also a very efficient way to get muddy. Let's float forward a bit. It's the late 1st century. Rome's emperor, Domitian, is assassinated, which, statistically speaking, was how most emperors left office. The Senate, desperate for someone stable, picks Nerva, an older, kinder man who immediately realized ruling Rome was a little like babysitting a bear with a sword. Nerva, wise enough to know he'd never control the legions, decided to adopt a popular general as his heir. And who better than our boy Trajan? The strong, sensible soldier from Spain with a kind of jawline that could hold the empire together. And just like that, Trajan became emperor in 98 AD. No bloodbath. No rebellion. Just a nice, smooth transfer of power, an absolute miracle in Roman politics. So, 98 AD. Trajan takes the throne. Rome collectively holds its breath, waiting for the usual descent into madness. But it never comes. Instead, Trajan starts working. Like, really working. Building roads, repairing aqueducts, organizing grain distributions. Basically turning Rome into a well-run HOA, but with better columns. He refused to live in extravagant luxury, which, for a Roman emperor, was practically blasphemy. He even walked among ordinary citizens, which might sound wholesome until you remember these were people who regularly dumped chamber pots into the street. Still, points for effort. Trajan also made the Senate feel useful again. He'd actually listen to them, let them debate things, and occasionally even agree. It was the political equivalent of giving your dog a fake steering wheel and letting him think he's driving. The senators loved it. But Trajan wasn't content with just maintaining the empire. He had that itch, the classic Roman urge to conquer someone else's homeland. His target, Dacia. Modern-day Romania. A land of mountains, gold, and people who did not particularly want to be Roman. Dacia was ruled by King Decebalus, a man who managed to annoy every emperor before Trajan. Decebalus had a knack for making treaties he didn't plan to honor and for existing in a region full of precious metals. Naturally, Trajan took this personally. So he launched not one, but two full-scale invasions. The Dacian Wars. They lasted several years, involved enormous engineering projects, and made Trajan's name immortal. He built bridges, massive, over-engineered Roman bridges, across the Danube just to prove he could. Then he built victory columns, victory coins, victory statues. It was like he couldn't stop decorating. In the end, Rome crushed Dacia, looted its gold, and annexed the territory. Decebalus died in that classic Roman fashion, dramatically and inconveniently for propaganda. Back home, Trajan threw a massive triumph. He paraded through Rome with all the subtlety of a modern influencer showing off a brand deal. The Senate loved him. The people loved him. His soldiers worshipped him. Even his enemies had to admit, the man was kind of unstoppable. Now, if you've ever been to Rome, or just stared at Google Images at 2 a.m., you've probably seen Trajan's column. That's his victory scrapbook. A 100-foot-tall marble spiral of carved scenes showing the Dacian Wars in microscopic detail. There are over 2,500 figures on it, most of whom look vaguely like Trajan, because modesty was never Rome's strongest virtue. It still stands today, weathered but impressive. Basically ancient Rome's version of a 4K Instagram reel. But Trajan didn't stop there. He built Trajan's Forum, the biggest, fanciest public space Rome had ever seen. Shops, libraries, massive arches, a basilica. All of it designed to make you feel small and Roman at the same time. He poured money into infrastructure, roads, harbors, aqueducts, public baths. Every Roman city, from Spain to Syria, got a facelift. He was like an obsessive city planner who couldn't sleep until every empire outpost had matching marble trim. And yet, despite all the glory, Trajan kept up his man-of-the-people-y image. He didn't stage wild parties or demand people worship him as a god. He was calm, competent, and, most importantly, not insane. Which for a Roman emperor was already a heroic achievement. Still, his relentless energy hinted at something else. Maybe Trajan wasn't just trying to rule Rome. Maybe he was trying to fix it. After a century of chaos and corruption, he was building a version of Rome that actually worked. A golden age. Of course, golden ages never last. After his success in Dacia, Trajan looked east. The Parthian Empire, that eternal rival sitting just beyond Rome's reach, had a messy succession crisis. Trajan saw an opportunity. You can probably guess what happened next. He invaded. Because why not? Conquering stuff had worked out great so far. In 113 AD, Trajan marched east with an enormous army. He swept through Armenia, then Mesopotamia. City after city fell. By 116 AD, he'd reached the Persian Gulf, the furthest any Roman army had ever gone. He was nearly 70. Which is kind of incredible when you realize most emperors didn't survive their 30s without being stabbed by a senator. But this time, the campaign didn't go perfectly. The newly conquered territories rebelled almost immediately. Logistics broke down. Trajan's health started failing. He got stuck in the unbearable heat, dealing with uprisings and endless supply issues, watching his grand expansion crumble as fast as he built it. In a rare moment of defeat, he decided to withdraw. He never made it back to Rome. On the journey home, in 117 AD, Trajan fell seriously ill, probably a stroke. He died in the city of Selinus, in modern-day Turkey. His ashes were returned to Rome and placed inside his beloved Column. The same marble monument that had told the story of his triumphs now became his tomb. There's something poetic about that. The emperor who built everything, ending up inside one of his own creations. A literal monument to himself and to Rome's last great expansion. Trajan's successor was his adopted son, Hadrian, yes, the one with the wall in Britain. Trajan had supposedly named him heir on his deathbed, though historians have argued about that for centuries. Hadrian honored his adoptive father lavishly. He had him deified, worshipped as a god. Which, for Rome, was just standard posthumous flattery. But in Trajan's case, it actually felt earned. The Senate agreed. They started using his name as a kind of yardstick for imperial success. Future emperors were praised if they were more fortunate than Augustus and better than Trajan. Imagine being so good at your job that your name becomes the official compliment. For over a century after his death, Roman writers spoke of Trajan as the perfect ruler, brave, fair, efficient, humble, just. The full package. Of course, no emperor is ever quite that flawless. Trajan's conquests cost countless lives. His golden age was built on the usual Roman foundation: slavery, war, and heavy taxation. But compared to his predecessors, he looked like a saint. Even in Christian mythology, he got a rare distinction. According to medieval legend, Trajan's soul was so virtuous that Pope Gregory the Great prayed him out of hell and into heaven. That's right, the man was allegedly rescued from eternal damnation by papal intercession. Because even the afterlife couldn't say no to Trajan. It's easy to picture Trajan as this marble statue of perfection. But underneath all the triumphs and titles, he was still human. He married Pompeia Plotina, a quiet and intelligent woman who shared his practical outlook. They had no children, which, in Rome, was basically a scandal waiting to happen. But Plotina was loyal and composed. When Trajan died, she made sure his legacy, and his chosen successor, were protected. There were whispers, of course. Rumors that Trajan had a fondness for handsome young men, or that his adoptions were sometimes more emotional than political. But Rome didn't really mind, as long as you kept the empire running and didn't marry your horse. He loved art, engineering, architecture. He spent time talking with scholars and builders. He genuinely seemed to care about how his people lived. And while other emperors collected jewels or gladiators, Trajan collected bridges. He once built a wooden one across the Danube so large it made engineers in later centuries wonder if it was even real. The man just couldn't resist overachieving. So here we are, centuries later, still whispering about him. Trajan, the soldier emperor who didn't lose his mind. The builder who couldn't stop improving things. The conqueror who died trying to make Rome even bigger. His column still rises quietly above the ruins of the Forum, covered in its tiny spirals of history. The marble soldiers still march, the Dacians still surrender, the emperor still stands tall, perfectly calm, perfectly composed. If you ever visit Rome and look up at that column, remember, that's not just stone. That's an ancient bedtime story carved in relief. A tale of ambition, order, and a man who, for once in Roman history, didn't burn everything down. So tonight, as you drift off, picture Trajan somewhere in the afterlife, standing beside his bridges, checking the angle of the arch, making sure the marble is aligned just so. Because perfection, for him, wasn't an act. It was a habit. And maybe that's why, even 2,000 years later, the world still quietly admires Rome's favorite overachiever. Sleep well, traveler. Rome's safe, for now.